Okay, so free agency happened this week as planned, although it was somewhat different than normal, especially because of the physicals constrained by the COVID-19 procedures. The draft will happen April 23 to 25, even if it is Roger Goodell sitting by his fireplace in slippers with a pipe and a newspaper reading off the names one at a time, and will still have the highest ratings we've ever seen for the draft. Peter, the schedule usually comes out in April. Should that continue, or should there be a different timetable for announcing when and where the 256 regular season games will be played?
Well, Mike, that's a very, very interesting question, because what has happened for the last 5 years, I have had access to that room when they've made up the schedule. I think the first 4 years I wrote about it. And then last year I did it as a podcast. So I did it as sort of a live podcast with Howard Katz and Mike North and the people on the scheduling team inside the NFL. And it always has seemed to me, okay, you're a week, they do this a week before the draft. And there is always this incredible, intense computer spitting out mondo schedules, and it's all for a rush because they want to get this schedule out before the draft. And they don't want to get it out on Wednesday of draft week. They want to get it out the week before so people can breathe and accept that and sort of, figure out what this schedule means. And then the next week they have obviously the draft. And I think there are some people in the league who've always said, look, we know that people need to make plans. Teams need to start scheduling. We get that. But, man, it would be nice for the schedulers if we knew what team Tua Tagovailoa is playing for in 2020, and some other people. Not only to give this a little bit of time to breathe in a year when right now, if you're those guys right now and you're sitting there and you are less than a month before the release date, you're maybe 23 days before the release date or 24 days, something like that. You have no idea who's playing quarterback for the New England Patriots. You have no idea what's going to happen to Cam Newton. You have no idea, for instance, what's going to happen probably on 4 or 5. They got big decisions to be made on 4 or 5 marquee teams. You're putting the Chiefs on 6 times in prime time. You know that. But I do think that there is some situation right now and some sentiment inside the league where they might want to wait until they have a little bit more certainty, especially with everything else that's going on. And Mike, there's one other thing that a smart person like you would realize when considering this. One of the things that I kept thinking about when Tom Brady was choosing his team, it was it was a big deal in some circles inside the NFL. Honestly, I think the NFL would much rather have had Tom Brady choose an AFC team. Okay? Because if you think about it, where are all the draws right now? Okay? The draws right now, with the exception of, say, the Chiefs and traditional draws, kind of like the Steelers. Okay? There's not really a draw in the AFC South. There's obviously the Ravens and the Steelers, are a draw. But if the Patriots play Andy Dalton, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to look at the Patriots out of curiosity. But if they're 1-3 on October 1st, they don't want the Patriots in prime time. And so you look at the AFC. Look at the AFC. Where are the big attractions? So now you look at the NFC, and oh my God, now they got Tom Brady. And all of a sudden, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to have to be a 5-time primetime team. They're not going to be playing at 1 o'clock on Sundays anymore, very much. So you try to look at all these things, and does that mean, for instance, that they do a lot more crossover games this year than they normally do. There's all these things that if I'm just looking at it, Mike, I say I will not be surprised if the NFL says we're going to release the schedule this year on May 2nd and not April 18th.
Well, and I also think, Peter, there's wisdom in creating more of an event from the schedule release. Instead of a week before the draft, if you bump it into May, middle of May, you make it another tent pole, right? Free agency this week, a great diversion and distraction for people who needed it. The draft will be the same thing. You push the schedule into May for the reasons you discussed, and from a business standpoint, there's a way to build it up. There's a way to milk it. There's a way to maybe bleed it out over multiple days where they announce the schedule, maybe one team at a time or something like that, to give the rest of us something we can sink our teeth into and fully and properly digest and fill that void on the calendar. And it's not just selfishness by the NFL to try to own the moment. It's the idea that it gives people something that will keep them sane at a time when they're going to be expected to stay inside. So you could make the schedule release, I think, a 3-night event, a Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night in the middle of May, just to give people something to look forward to and something they'll stay home and watch. And they need, these are all, look, they need somebody in the NFL whose job is to do one thing and one thing only: identify all the ways the world is going to potentially unfold over the next 6 months and come up with every possible strategy and possibility for filling those voids and handling those issues in a way that is good for the league and that is good for the people who rely on it.
I'll tell you what, you're one insane human being. Has anybody ever told you that? I mean,
why?
A 3-day schedule release.
I'm just saying, hey,
that is,
look.
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying that's what we've come to, because you understand that anything, any little nugget about the NFL is going to be a 40-minute show on ESPN. I mean,
right.
Because
it's something that makes it makes people, it gives you something to look forward to, and it makes people willing to stay inside and comply with what they need to do. So they really need to think about it. I think you're onto something there. For a variety of reasons, they should bump it into May. Who cares if Ron Rivera doesn't know when he's going to face the Cowboys? Is it early? Is it late? How's that really affect the draft anyway? Gee, I better go out and get more corners because I faced the Cowboys week 1. Forget about it. Move it forward, and I agree with you on that completely.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.